So we've done this talk a couple of times before, and this time we decided to change it up a little bit. And so if you are interested in seeing the original one, we'll give you some of that information in a moment as well. Today, we're talking again about digital chalk and talk, which we have talked about before. And again, it's going to be about two different options that you sort of have. One is to capture a physical surface and find a digital way to bring that to people, or the other is to draw on a digital surface. So there's pros and cons of both of those. There's also two different reasons you may want to do some sort of a chalk and talk or a demonstrate or annotate using drawing in a classroom. And those would be to either demonstrate something to your students, take them through an equation, to draw something that is sort of a visual or a schematic that you wouldn't be necessarily able to do by presenting it in a slide, for example. Or it might be to collaborate. So you might want a collaborative space where everyone can write and draw and contribute. And so there's different options available to you depending on what type of activity you are looking to do. And so hopefully we'll provide you with some opportunities to see some different ways you can do this depending on what you're looking to achieve. So there's lots of benefits to doing this in a class. It does, number one, breaks it up, right? It takes away from just presenting with slides. It gives you another way of connecting with students, of engaging with them. So it could just be that it's easier to draw or write something and to show people the process as you do it. So if you've already pre-drawn it, say, and you take a picture of it and you put it up on the screen, that's one thing. But when they see you working through something and actually going through the process, they follow along, and that can help people sort of remember the process. Part of the process is important. Of course, there's mapping and visualization, so you can also help people make connections. So you can, place things that have something to do with each other in proximity and that kind of thing, and sort of show the connections. And that's often used with like mind mapping too, which is, I know, a very popular way of talking about like diagnoses and stuff like that in the nursing school. So it's a great way of sort of, you can come up with a central sort of theme that you're looking at, and then branching off of it to see what's related and what's connected. And again, these can be collaborative spaces, so it can be a great way to improve engagement. So they can be ways that students can also interact with the information. It could be a way of annotating something, or it could be a way of all posting your own thoughts about something. So, for example, putting little Post-its on a shared whiteboard with different examples. That could be an activity that your students do in order to sort of connect the learning to their own experience, for example. And so there's a lot of opportunities when doing this digitally rather than doing this more in a physical sense, like using a blackboard or a whiteboard or a flip chart. And some of those great opportunities are that digital drawings can bring visuals closer, right? So with a camera, you can actually bring people closer to something that you're drawing on. So you don't have to draw as big on a board, or you can show very detailed information, say something from a book, and circle things, for example, that you couldn't necessarily do in a classroom if you were just, you couldn't hold up the book and circle something for a 1,000-room lecture and expect everyone to see it. So you can magnify things. And that's really nice. So you can also do something that appears on the student's screen, so it's just closer to them, and that can be effective as well. So even if you're in a classroom, some of these digital tools might be helpful ways of bringing things either closer to the students or projecting them larger. Digital whiteboards can also be collaborative spaces, which can be done in smaller classes, seminars, for example, where everybody can go around a whiteboard and work together on it. But again, with those lecture classes, that might not be a possibility. So this can give those kinds of possibilities to groups that are not necessarily sitting together to collaborate, or large groups to collaborate on something. And some of the tools that we'll show you allow for collaboration of many people on one surface. Of course, that can get chaotic, so you have to plan in advance and think about the best ways to do that. But that doesn't mean it's not a wonderful tool to have in your back pocket. And anything that appears on the computer can easily be captured and reviewed later. So that's something that we've found has been a big plus for students, is they've loved that lectures have been recorded. And it actually hasn't necessarily meant that students don't come to class or that they're not getting the content, just that they like the flexibility of how they can interact with it, and even to review later for a test, for example. And so if you are doing these demonstrations and they used to be on a blackboard, and then all the students would walk away and they wouldn't have it anymore, perhaps they'd take a picture on their cell phone. But if you're sitting at the back of the class, how useful is that? Now you can capture these and share them with the students after as, say, study notes or as other tools to help with their learning. The other thing is they can be a bit more portable in a sense. So imagine having to bring around a whiteboard or a flip chart with you everywhere you go. Now maybe you can bring your tablet and just plug it into something in order to do the same effect, right? So they can be a bit more flexible that way as well. Of course, there are challenges. It can be complicated to set up and manage these things. Today, both Chloe and I have set up a lot of different things that we're going to show you. And for us, setting up and presenting this workshop is probably the most complex workshops that we do. And because we're using various tools that are digital tools, I feel very fortunate. I have a dual display set up. Chloe does not, and she's doing this all on one monitor. So keep that in mind as she does it, because you'll see it's totally possible with a little planning and coordination. But I do have like my tablet beside me. I have my phone plugged in. You can see that my phone is also, I don't know if you can see my hand in front of it there. My phone is also plugged in and showing something. So I have a lot of moving parts here. And obviously I would choose one when I was teaching, maybe two, depending on what I'm doing and how ambitious I am. But managing all these different things can be very difficult. So keeping that in mind, that you want to make a setup that you feel comfortable and confident doing. Digital handwriting and drawing is much less precise. So I have a Wacom tablet. I was going to also demo that today, but it's acting up on me, so I won't. But, I can draw on it, but it's not one of the ones with a screen built in. So I have to sort of know where my hand is at all times, which makes it more difficult. If you've ever drawn with a mouse on your screen, you know how awkward that is. There are other options, of course, like using tablets and using your finger or a stylus. And so there's some ways to get it a little bit better, but it's still a little clunky compared to just writing with a pen or a piece of chalk. So that's something to keep in mind, that it could be a little trickier. And also creating stuff that's really effective and does what you actually want it to do might take special equipment or software. So I've got an inexpensive document camera in here that I'm going to use, and you'll see that the quality is not great. I took the better one to the office, so now it's in our center, and it is much better, but it cost almost $400 for that piece of equipment. So to set up exactly how you want to present stuff might be a little costly. We'll try and show you some inexpensive options as well, but it can cost depending on what you're trying to achieve, and it really isn't the same. So it means you have to think about it and think about how it's different from writing on the blackboard, and how it might be a different experience for your students. And that might not be a bad thing. You might actually find that rethinking how you're doing these kinds of demonstrations is actually a good process to get you thinking about them in a different way. So that can be a pro or a con, really. So in the first Chalk and Talk workshop, we went through some of the features in Zoom, and I'll touch on some of them very briefly today. We went through a lot of camera demos. So I had like multiple cameras set up, showing you how the different cameras looked in comparison to each other. So if you want to see that kind of comparison, feel free to review the first video. So we have a link to that. And also we did some low-tech purchase tips. So there's a lot more of that in the slides. So if you're looking for some tips on, where to find some cheap whiteboards or other props and things that can help you in your space, there's a list in those slides. And then also we went through Google Drawings and Jamboard in detail. And that's something that Ariane did. So she's joining us today. So if you have questions about those two platforms, which are available to all faculty and students at Ryerson, feel free to ask. And just a reminder, those are like Ryerson supported tools that you can use. So you may not be aware that as part of the Google Workspace, we have both Drawings and Jamboard, which can be collaborative spaces where you can draw and you could share those with students. And even in a Zoom call, you can do something as simple as opening up a Jamboard and sharing your screen so that you have it on your screen and the students can access it as well. So just some things to keep in mind. That's what we have in the first version of Chalk and Talk. In this version, we're going to show you a little bit about OBS, which we're working on a series of tutorials, and Chloe will get to that later. We're also going to show you about using multiple cameras. So I'm going to show you a bit more about cameras again, just really fairly briefly, but also talk about how maybe you could do that and use OBS. We're going to look at a couple of whiteboard applications. Again, we're going to look at Jamboard a little bit, but we're also going to show you Miro and compare those two because they're very different. And then after that, I took a quick look at FigJam and Excalidraw, which are another couple of tools that you can use. All of these you can access a free version of. So we're offering you some examples of things you might consider. Also be very aware that if it's not a Ryerson supported tool and you ask students to use it, that you should really consider carefully what you're asking your students to do in terms of signing up for things and giving their information in order to participate fully in class. So just some things to have in the back of your mind. And you can also suggest to students, for example, that they come up with another email account or a dummy email account to sign up for these things if they're concerned. But in a lot of these cases, you can just sign up using your Ryerson credentials again, and it will sort of use your Google account to authenticate. So it's not like you're signing into a new thing. You're using your Google to authenticate. So it's another option. And so we'll look at the other options and give you a little comparison chart at the end that you can use to help you make decisions about whether one of these would be right for you. So now we're going to get into OBS, and enough of me talking for a while. We'll get to Chloe and she'll do some demonstration as well. So a little bit more active, interesting stuff to look at on the screen coming up for you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about OBS, which stands for Open Broadcaster Software. It's available for free online to download, and it works on both Mac and PC. So it's a great resource. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be releasing step-by-step tutorials as well as a scene template. So it'll make it very clear on how to download, install, and set up OBS, how to use our scene template, as well as how to do things like set up your camera and audio and connect everything to Zoom. So that will be out very soon. There is a little demo that Eric did in one of our previous workshops if you want to see a little bit more as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I'm going to demo a little bit of what you can do in OBS. So I have OBS open in the background right now, and I have it connected to Zoom. So everything, you'll be able to see what it would look like as if you were maybe a student, if you were using OBS. So I have a couple of scenes set up. So this is one right here. See, perfect. So right now you're seeing the scene that I've set up in OBS. So I've added in my webcam, I've added in this title here. And so everything is a separate layer as well. So yeah, you can see it's gone, make it come back. I've added in the background. I've also added in this little image logo at the bottom. So you could customize it specifically for your class and all your teaching needs. I've also done one here, let's see. Yeah, so this one here is my webcam, and it also has the slides. And I'll show you here, you can make things bigger, smaller. And once you get the hang of it, it's very fun to use. It's great to like play around with it before you actually need to use it, because there are a lot of components, but once you get the hang of it, it's an awesome resource. I'll go back to my full camera here. Awesome, that's all I'm going to show for now. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, and it's awesome that you can customize it as well. I think I'll just pass it back over to Sally.
Sorry about that, just switching everything back. So you can see we have a lot of production going on in the background. Good news is we both have RTA degrees, so we're trying our best to remember all the things we learned how to do in studios as we do this presentation. So now I'm going to talk a bit more about multiple cameras, and you can see how maybe multiple cameras and knowing about OBS might be able to be used together in a way that might be effective. And that's actually the reason why Eric Liberta, who does the demo that we have for you available, that we've linked to in a couple slides previously, that's what he used it for. He actually used it so he could use his tablet as like a drawing surface, and the students could still see his face. They could still see the chat. He actually made a window where the chat from Zoom was also there. So he was able to use that space in a way where he could have all those sources showing at the same time. And I'll talk a bit more about that in terms of when and when not to do that in a moment. The first thing is, one of the easiest ways to have a second camera when you're presenting and to have a surface where you can write on is to just use your phone. Often most of us have a phone with a camera that can install the Zoom app. And the good news with Zoom is that you can have it running with your account on multiple devices, as long as they're different types of devices. So if you have a phone and a laptop running, you can have Zoom running on both at the same time, be in the same call and be yourself on both devices. So as you can see right now, I'm here on my laptop, but I'm also here on my phone over here. I don't know if you can see it. I will spotlight it so you guys can all see. Well, it'll let me. Yes, there we go. So there we go. So this right now is actually my phone displaying something, and I have it set up with a tripod and pointed at a wall that I've just made a black background for myself, so I can put books in front of it or other things. I also have at the top here, I don't know if we can see if I just tilt up a little bit. I have a clip attached at the top here, so I could actually, sorry, it's probably a little quiet, but I can actually clip something to the top like a piece of paper and actually write and draw on it on this background. I've got some other ideas for how you could set up your phone to be used as a separate screen that you could use, but this is probably one of the easiest things you can do to actually add a second camera without any real cost. It's just a little bit of setup, and once you're set up, you're good to go. I'm also using the rear facing camera, I believe it's called, the one that's not the selfie cam, and that's how I'm able to get a better quality image, and it works really well. Now you'll notice the minute you when you join a Zoom meeting on your phone, it will use the front facing camera first, assuming that you want to do a selfie view of yourself like you're in a meeting, and you'll just have to click that little button at the top that you can see on the slides there in order to switch that. So it's very simple, and I love that it's such a simple thing. There's an option to connect like an iPhone from the share options. We found it to be very laggy and to cause a lot of issues to try and share that way. So if you notice that in your share options in Zoom, you can connect a phone there, we've actually found that to be much less effective than connecting your phone by joining the call on your phone. One other caveat I should have mentioned is that you should plug headphones into the headphone jack. That way you won't get any weird feedback. I've also muted my microphone on the phone, but that way the speaker isn't on. And if the speaker was on, that we'd have some problems in this call right now. So that's why I've got the headphone jack. My headphones are plugged in, even though I'm not wearing them. That way at least the speaker is deactivated. So here's some setups that you can do with the phone to keep it steady. I'm using the first one, the tripod. There's also phone mounts that you can get, as well as my favorite is the wire shelf. So the wire shelf allows you to lie your phone down horizontally, and that way it becomes like a document camera, and you can draw or use Post-its or whatever you want underneath that wire shelf. So that's just your basic kitchen wire shelf. You might be able to find it at a dollar store or Walmart or something. And that works really well for me, and I've really enjoyed using that. It's been very effective. And again, I just grabbed a piece of that Velcro tie stuff to keep it steady, and it worked really nicely. The other nice thing about using that rear-facing camera is now I've got a monitor on the back side of the phone, which you can likely see in the slide there. So I can actually see what's going on below and have a real sense of what the students are seeing. There's a lot of other camera options. Again, there's more details about this in the first version of the Chalk and Talk. But if you're interested in purchasing a camera, these are some of the options you might want to look at. A webcam can work similarly. I'm using a webcam right now instead of the camera on my laptop, just a better quality camera. Again, the IPEVO is the better of the two document cameras by far, but it's more costly by it's about 3 times the price of the Hue. But they both do a decent job. And I can show you the Hue in a second, which I will do in a moment. And then also the HDMI converter little guy. So I have one of these. And it just is a little box that attaches if I have an HDMI cable. And because I have a professional grade, like point and shoot camera, like a DSLR camera, I can plug that into this cable and then plug this into my computer, and now Zoom can see my professional camera. So if you have one of those cameras at home, maybe you have an amateur photographer in your midst or a professional one, and they're willing to let you use their camera, you can buy that little device for I think it's about $30, $40, and it lets you plug in a professional camera to Zoom, and then you get very beautiful background, soft focus, and looks very professional. And you might notice, I think Eric's using that setup in his demo. So if you watch that, you'll see an example of that. So here's another thing to know. You can see here, this is just a quick glance at some of the cameras that I once had connected to my Zoom call. So if you click the little arrow beside your camera options, you'll see them all listed. Now, right now, I'm actually using my OBS virtual camera. You wouldn't know it because it just looks like I'm using my webcam, because that's how I set up the scene. The scene is just my webcam right now, but that gives me the opportunity to switch to something else when I want to show you something different, which I'm going to do in just a second. But you can see I've also tried out this thing called which is like a simpler version of OBS. And so it gives me a camera as well. And then my IPEVO here is the document camera. So it's really easy to switch between them in Zoom. So if you just want to switch between sources, if you just want to go between them, you can just click on them and it switches automatically. It works really quickly and easily. So you don't have to use OBS. We're just suggesting it if you want to show more than one thing at a time. It's a really cool tool. So let me give you a demo of what I mean about that in a second here. First, let's talk about the idea of multiple cameras at once in OBS. So it's great because you can do that picture-in-picture look like Chloe was showing you. It lets you add other elements like maybe a chat window or a shape or some more text. So if you want to have some text that stays permanently on the screen while you're doing something, like working out assignment 1's question 2 or something, and you want to put that up there so that everyone knows what you're working on, even if they join late, you can do that. But it could be distracting, right? So having multiple screens up at once, if it's not necessary, might, add extra complexity where it's not needed. However, if you find that you want to switch between things a lot, so you want them to see you full screen, and then you want them to see you in the corner and then just see the text box, or you want them to see you while you're talking and you want them to see the drawing at the same time, and you think that you'll go back and forth from full screen you drawing, full screen you drawing. If you're switching back and forth a lot, that's distracting too. So you might want to think about setting up something where you just keep them both on the screen rather than switching between them a lot. So it really depends on what you're setting up. But a lot of people are turning to OBS because it's kind of a nice flexible tool where you can set up a bunch of scenes. You click between them, just like I showed you, you can click the cameras in Zoom. Once you have it set up, you just click between your setups and then it can go between them for you and have it all pre-done, pre-set up before you start a call, and you just go between which different sources you want. So I'm going to switch now over to my OBS here just so I can switch. So this is what it looks like when I'm set. And these are my scenes on the bottom left. I'm going to click down here to Hue, and you'll see I have a picture-in-picture of myself. And I will just pause the share so that, again, we are looking at not the back end, but you're seeing the front end of what a student would see. And you can see that I have myself a marker here. Again, you can see how the Hue has those sort of scan lines going through it, which is kind of annoying, but I do have a little whiteboard and I could work out, oops, sorry. I could do some equations and stuff here if I wanted to. I'm totally making up things that don't mean anything because I don't work in this area. And again, you may not have been able to hear me very well as I leaned over, so you may want to invest in wearing a lapel mic, which you can purchase as well pretty inexpensively. I just had too many things plugged in already, so I haven't done it for today. But you can see how now I can show a point, I can leave it up on the screen while I keep talking about it, and that could be something that's very effective. If I had more time and took a little bit more time to set this up, I could also have the chat just below me here in a box. That would be showing as well, so I could address questions that might be coming through if I feel like I can manage all those things, or I can just sort of focus on this. And if I have a TA, which would be, oh, how wonderful would that be? Maybe they are watching the chat for me while I'm doing this part of the presentation. But you can see how it's kind of nice to have both here. And quickly, I wanted to show you while I have this open, the tablet share option. So I use an Android tablet, and there's not as many options for that as you might find for an iPhone to do this kind of thing. But I found a little app I could put onto my tablet that would allow me to basically stream to a web page. And I've embedded that web page into my OBS, which again is just a few steps. And if you find that you want to make a setup like this, setting up is the hardest part. Once it's set up and you want to use it, it's really easy. So if you have any questions about the setup and you want some support, please feel free to reach out to the Teaching Center. We've been playing around with it a lot, and there's about 3 or 4 of us now that feel comfortable helping. And we can help you with maybe setting up just one scene and giving it a try if you have questions after you see our tutorials. Again, they're coming very, very soon. Hopefully early next week, hopefully something like that, we'll have them up. And once you're all set up, it doesn't take that long to do it. It's just like a step-by-step process to make sure you have what you like. So just to show you, it looks like a black box right now, but again, I can draw on here, and I have myself a little blackboard that students can see set up. And that's again, me just using my finger on my tablet. The nice thing about OBS as well is I was able to crop this image a little bit, so you can't see my notifications bar, you can't see all the extra stuff that's around the edges, you're just seeing the writing surface. So I can provide students with, quick notes, jotting down things or drawing things just to show them an example, right, of we have this person over here and this person over here. What should this person say? That person has a weird head. But anyway, the point is that I have a new drawing surface. So there's just a few of those. So now we're going to switch over to talking about the, switch my camera back to, sorry. I'll do that after I introduce Chloe here. So we're going to switch over to talking about digital whiteboards where students and you can collaborate.
Yeah, so we're going to demo. I know everybody received a little link to the Miro board that we're going to be using. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. Jamboard is connected to Ryerson, so you can always it's supported by Ryerson as well, so it's not third party for us. Miro, I believe you can sign in with your Ryerson credentials, but it's not like directly connected to us because it's not a part of Google Workspace like Jamboard is. And Sally, do you mind just going to the next slide? Yeah, so I'm just going to go over a few features of each. They're very similar. Miro is a little more complicated, but that is because there's lots of built-in templates, frameworks, icons, and shapes that you can use. It has a built-in presentation mode. For Miro, you can log in, like I said before, using your Ryerson credentials and like your G Suite account, like your Gmail account, but it's not directly connected. And it can be a little overwhelming at first, but it is a great resource and it is free. Jamboard, on the other hand, it's a little more simple, but it does make it a lot more user-friendly. It's great for like quick little brainstorming sessions. It's already connected to Google Workspace, so it won't be too unfamiliar for you or your students. There is a little bit less functionality and there aren't as many templates. So we're going to do a demo of each of them. So I'll share my screen and we'll put the links into the chat for everybody to try it out. We'll put them both in at the same time and give just like a couple of minutes to try it out and see the features. So I will share my screen. And then when the links are in the chat, we will all be in either the Jamboard or the Miro demo. And you can see there's the toolbars at the side in both of them. So it's a little similar. There's just not as many things in the Jamboard toolbar. And up at the top, you can go to different frames and like go in between them. And then with Miro, it's a little more like one giant whiteboard that you move around. So feel free to like add some sticky notes. You can go in here and you can type whatever you prefer. And then in the second board, you can draw as well. And I'll just stop sharing my screen, Sally, if you want. People can still keep trying it out. We do have some alternatives, so let Sally talk about that when you'd like. Yeah, and you'll see that that Miro has a lot of cool options that are much more feature rich, and there are paid versions as well. I know that FIAS has paid versions for some of their courses, and they use that and prefer it. We haven't had a chance to connect yet and find out exactly what you get with that account that you don't get with the free one. My guess is it also helps for signing up and having people shared on the same boards and things in terms of managing large classes and that kind of thing. But a lot of the functionality is there within the free version that you can get when you're signed in with your Ryerson credentials. So it's like a free educational hybrid or something that works quite fairly well. Okay, so a couple of alternatives that I found that I thought were kind of interesting. FigJam has come through in a couple of the newsletters that I follow about cool tools. It's created by the company that creates Figma, which is like a brainstorming sort of app for designing and planning design projects that seems to be fairly popular. They have this thing called FigJam that's pretty much free for a lot of its features. And it's a brainstorming whiteboard. The best things about Figma is their collaborative tools within it. So there's lots of ways of like leaving comments,
of doing live sort of chatting within it, saying, hey, I really like this, that kind of thing, without having to speak, and just use text and chatting in order to add things. You can add stickers, you can add likes, little emojis, things like that. So depending on the class you're doing, it might be a fun way of doing things. It might also give them a huge toolbox that might be too many things for you to sort of police as you're doing your class. So you can decide whether or not you like that part. It does have some really nice automatic smoothing when you're drawing and writing out text to make things easier to read. So if you're using a mouse to draw, for example, it does a decent job of cleaning that up for you, which is nice. It's also an infinite single surface. So the big thing with Jamboard is that it's multiple cards that are a limited size. With this one, it's one large one. Miro works the same way, but the thing with Miro is you can actually sort of save sort of snapshots of different areas that people can go to and know which layout they're looking at. Whereas with FigJam, you'd have to just zoom out and zoom in to the parts that you want to see. So it's a little bit less user-friendly that way. At the bottom, I've added a whole bunch of links if you're interested in checking it out. I did find it really fun to use. So if you're doing a fun little activity with your class, it might be fun to try out. I found there's an article comparing it to Jamboard and Miro, as well as a tutorial. I have an example board that you can feel free to play around on, as well as a try it out space. Excalidraw is a newer one, and it's really cool. It started as a completely free thing, and now they have an option where you can sign in and it'll have a little bit more functionality. But the free version is really, really nice. Hopefully you can't hear, my husband's doing the recycling behind me. So hopefully you can't hear that, I apologize. So it has a hand-drawn look, which is really neat. So everything you do has this kind of cool hand-drawn look, and you have options between neat and moderate and messy, basically, are your options. So you can make it look more sketchy or less sketchy. And then it comes with all this library. And people can add, the community who use it can add to the library of different little things you can add to your Excalidraw. It does have a limited drawing surface, so that there's only so much room that you can do, but you can save an Excalidraw and share it with someone else and let them finish it and then save it and share it with you. So for example, if you want students to sort of, label something or place items in the proper order, or do some sort of draw a line between this and that, you could save an Excalidraw that you started with some basic objects. They can open it, they can finish it off, save it, and submit it to you, which is kind of cool. I think that could be really useful. The other thing is you can add your own library. So if there's tools that you use a lot, for example, if you're doing things with specific types of notation, you can save those as elements that you can quickly add to the board, which is quite nice. I really thought it was a great tool. The other great thing is you don't have to sign in to use it. So you can send a link to all your students in the class to connect to it, and then they can just connect to it right away without making sure that they have an account first, like with Miro or FigJam, or worrying about those Google glitches that you get when you're trying to connect to something in the Ryerson Google Drive that won't let you connect because you haven't signed in to your Ryerson Google, and you end up with all those issues. So it just is a link, they can get to it and they can start interacting with it right away. So that's another thing. So yeah, lots of cool things. Again, instructions, examples, and an opportunity to try it out there. So finally, what we did is we put these 4 examples that we talked about today. Remember, the one that we didn't really go into detail is drawings. It does have some amount of collaboration to it, but what's really great for is doing diagrams. It has a whole library of diagrams that you can, templates that you can use. So if you're looking to create a mind map, or you're looking to create like a process chart, those kind of things, it's a really great tool. And again, it's free and part of our workspace here at Ryerson. So that's not on this table. These ones are more for, collaborative drawing and free thinking, brainstorming type stuff. And we have a chart with, the pros and cons, some things to think about in terms of each of them that you can review if you're interested.